Okay, let's go on to our subjects. What will the financial system of Ukraine be like after the recovery? In order to talk about this, we need to understand where we are at the moment, what are our current challenges, and this is what will be the background of our talks about future. Talking about our banking system in general, it's rather small. Our GDP is rather small. The Ministry of Economy estimates the nominal size of GDP in Ukraine. It's 9 trillion grivnas. If in dollars, then it's a little above $200 billion. The bank system of Ukraine, the bank equity is 3.5 trillion of grivnas, so it's a bit less than 40% of the ratio of a bank system to GDP. Is it a lot or is it little? Let us ask the first panelist. Let us ask Olena Zubchenko. She worked in Minfin, and she's now the deputy chairman of the board of Bank. Miss Olena, what do you think about this size? Is it enough? Is it sufficient? How many loans in the economy are coming into the economy? What are the challenges and how can this ratio grow? Well, if we really go into research theoretically, I'm not talking about the practical aspect, but rather the theory. If we look at the world economies, then it is not always that increasing loans can really spur economical growth. But let me give you some figures here. At the moment in Ukraine, the scale of bank loans to GDP is 13%, which is the historical minimum. They used to be greater, and it is much less than the pre-war period that was 19% in the year 2022. If we compare the situation with other countries like Poland, it's 22.9, Czech Republic 39, Austria it's 43, Germany 49, Denmark 85.2. But I also inquired as I was preparing for this panel. I looked at the example of the UK, and we saw that when the loan ratio to GDP was raising, the economy wasn't growing. So it's a question of debate. Therefore, it would be nice if the loans that we give out, they're paid back and returned. So talking about increasing the loans, like last year we were talking about energy efficiency, and banks were trying to loan the energy efficiency enterprises. And when we went out into the regions, we discovered that it was not very popular because the actors did not know how to give them back, and even the discounted rates did not always persuade the business whether they will be able to give the loans back, even if we're talking about that discounted rate at 5%. I believe that our business does need loans and they ask for more. Let us ask Ms. Larissa, as the deputy chairman of the largest Ukrainian bank, what are the actual state of things in your bank? In which demand are the loans? Is the demand rising? And what is the bank planning on in terms of increasing the loans, if there are such plans? Actually, the part of the bank loans for business has changed a lot since the beginning of the year of the war. It's not only this part and the ratio, but also the profile of businesses to Privatbank. If in the beginning of the war, Privatbank felt very comfortable as in terms of giving loans to retail clients, and it was not very substantial in terms of providing loans to business clients. But now we have reached the position of the leader in this market. Let me give you a few figures. During the times of the war, the credit profile to business clients has increased threefold, and it's now 50 billion grivnas. Every day, we're giving out 160 millions of grivnas of new loans, and we're growing twice as fast as the market is. How it used to be, I believe that every business has its own history about what happened to them in the beginning of the war. Talking about Privatbank, we were one of the first entities that did not stop, because with the full-scale invasion, everything stops: businesses, logistics, finance. But we realized that if business is not supported, then the country will not able to stand through. Therefore, in the April of 2022, we resumed the giving out loans. It was a difficult decision to make, and I'm saying this as a person who was responsible for the quality of the credit profile, as I was the chief risk manager. But we found solutions to be able to balance the needs of business and our responsibility as bank management for the bank stability. And in 2024, we have given out 24 billion hryvnias of loans. We are providing loans to the businesses in the areas where others would not do that, because we realize that businesses in the frontline areas need support. We have a great number of examples how our loans were really helpful to the businesses. We have a client from Kharkiv. 70% of equity of the assets of this client were on the occupied territory. But then after this area was liberated, with our loan of 100 million hryvnias, his business was renovated. It is 1,700 Ukrainian families that we have provided loans to and given them hope to a good future. Let me also give you an example about a client from Kherson that requested the armed forces of Ukraine to hit his own enterprise, because this is where the enemy set up their headquarters. And this killed his business, but he was able to resume his business with the help of our loan. We're happy to be part of it, and we're proud of the fact that because of our efforts, Privatbank has been recognized as leader for loan provision in our frontline areas. It is something that concerns the situation and its dynamics, but let me also talk about what we see happening in the future. I believe that all of us at least once imagined what will life be like after the war is over. There will be peace, stability, recovery. The need of Ukraine for recovery is estimated at $500 billion, and it's a huge amount, an immense amount for Ukraine, because for the GDP last year was estimated as $190 billion, and it is obvious that banks will play a crucial role in the recovery. After the war is over, we will see an influx of new enterprises. People will be coming back from the front line. They will be starting new businesses. The war will be ceased. The macro situation will be stabilized. The inflation will slow down. The credit loan, the loan rates will be smaller. But let us not look at this through the pink sunglasses. Let us be honest and let us admit that this path will be difficult, and the bank system will face the risks that were unprecedented. These new businesses that will be starting, those that will require funding, they will not have any credit history, and there will be nothing to back them, and they will not be able to demonstrate a stable flow of funds so that to make them comfortable for providing loans. And it is a challenge that will need to be resolved. There must be programs of grants, loans, the risk-sharing programs, the cooperation with the international financial organizations in order to balance out the need for funding the recovery and providing the financial stability of the system. Thank you so much. I think we have come to the question for Mr. Oleksiy. What do you think about these risks? How prepared is the National Bank to handling these post-war challenges? Let us imagine that the war has finished, the system is starting to renew, are you planning any kind of shifts to regulations or control measures? Can there be any derogations to this system? Thank you for your question. Let me start by telling you what we are starting with the background. The National Bank has been leading the policy for over 10 years now. We are balancing the stability and growth. And what we have been doing since the full-scale invasion, it is this step-by-step movement towards maintaining the balance of financial stability and preparing the foundation for growth. Let me tell you that over the recent 2.5 years, we can already see that there is growth already. For the 8th month of this year, the pure assets of the banking system has risen by 4%, and much of it is due to the loans, the parts of investment in debt certificate is decreased. Talking about the pure grivna loan profile, year after year it's rising. In August, it has shown 33.7% growth. The scale of loans is increasing for all banks, but let us also remember what happened in the period from 2014 over to 2017, where there was no full-scale invasion, but there were certain hostilities, and the geopolitical situation was more quiet, more peaceful, not as now. So then, if we're talking about the regulations and the capital, we can remember that there were certain standards and regulations, but they were rather formal, or they were distorting, several actors were distorting the reports, and the capabilities were not as enhanced as now. So it was not very efficient. And now, when the crisis came around in 2014, we remember then that 103 banks left the market because of their insolvency. Therefore, we learned these lessons, and we started moving and changing it towards making it more stable. And now we can see the results, as mentioned by Olena and Larissa, that despite the full-scale invasion, despite the destruction of businesses, the banking system remains stable. The loans are increasing. So this step-by-step movement and growth in the dialogue with the market is helping the progress. Another factor that we're working on right now is the implementing of the European standards to bank regulations. As a result of our self-assessment with the engagement of Pricewaterhouse, so the correspondence of Ukrainian regulations to the European ones amount to a little over 70%, and hopefully that soon we will be able to get the conclusion from the European Commission that our regulations fully comply with the European standards, and this will create additional opportunities for bringing in Ukrainian banks with the European capital to loans in hryvnia. As regards the standards, we do sometimes hear that they're somewhere not fully functional, but let me give you some figures. The fact that over the recent 2 years, we have gradually been resuming and recovering the pre-war regulations, and we're also introducing certain enhancements looking at our Euro integration path, and the European capitals and the bank system is bringing profit, and the profit that it is making, it's helping them scale up their own capital. And we are now shifting to the regulatory capital of the first level. We were conducting research of the world experience as well, and we have discovered that the minimum regulated capital to reach this first level, it's at least 15% that will enable to first create the financial stability and also promote the economical growth. At the moment, the average figure is 15% as of now. So it is the sufficiency of regulatory capital. So talking about the standards of the National Bank being squeezed somewhere or compromised and blocking the loan growth, I believe that it's not correct to be saying this. Another aspect that I would like to mention is that our process to assuring compliance of our regulations to the European ones will enable us to engage loans in hryvnia with banks of foreign groups, and the figures provided by Taras and Olena testify that the Ukrainian economy and the Ukrainian banking system is rather small for the demand that will be there for the purpose of recovery. And we do realize that on our own, the banking system will not be able to perform these tasks, and so there will be other banks coming in, and it will not be about competition. It will be a certain niche of the Ukrainian banking sector.
Of all of the news, you're probably aware, Mr. Hetmantsev has already mentioned that, again, 50% of the revenue made by banks is going to be taxed because the government needs this money. And from the standpoint of Mr. Hetmantsev, banks are the kind of fat tomcats that need to be made leaner. So this year is going to be rolled back in 2026. Again, we will have to get back to this figure of 50% of revenue on income. When talking about SMEs, which are the drivers of the economy in this country, I suppose it's a very good review. MasterCard can offer this very good review via different mechanisms of digitalization for small businesses that they have to offer. Ms. Inga, how do you see the situation for SMEs nowadays in Ukraine? What is the state of play? What's happening to it? How contemporary, how modern is it becoming? Is it utilizing 100% all of the contemporary technologies, for example, payment technologies in particular? Thank you very much, Taras, for your question. Actually, when inside our company we begin to launch into this conversation about the recovery of Ukraine's economy, we always begin with SMEs. Even according to the statistics, 99% of all of the enterprises by number in Ukraine are SMEs. So you're definitely right. It is the economic driver in Ukraine. Every year we do a study for ourselves, for our own purposes, to trace all of the trends, to make sure that we understand what's happening in this segment. And the findings of this year, let me share some of the figures with you, that 93% of all SMEs utilize non-cash payments in Ukraine. As of now, this is a very fine indicator. It is growing. And it is yet another testament to the fact that entrepreneurs begin to understand that cashless payments, it's about transparency, quick circulation of money, and it's a driver for their business growth. 72% of our respondents also said that about over 50% of their revenue is shaped at the expense of cashless payments. It's another very fine indicator. Some other interesting figures to share with you. 42% of the polled said that they began to apply AI. Be reminded that last year this indicator was 21% lower. IE So they are using all of the contemporary technologies. Some of the core areas to apply AI for SMEs at this moment is for marketing, communications, and targeting. Onwards, I think, is going only to grow. 62% of SMEs are exporting their production as of now or are planning to start their exports in the nearest future. So globalization still continues in this segment. 85% of SMEs are using digital channels because it's convenient. In fact, it's fast. If you want to be visible, conspicuous in this market or in other markets without digital channels, I think it's impossible to do without. Taras, you also asked me about what we are doing, right, in order to support SMEs. In fact, for us, this is a strategic investment, and we have been working for many years in Ukraine and abroad in terms of SME support. For many years, we have been partnering with the Ministry of Digital Transformation of Ukraine. We started together with them Dear Business Portal, which up until now is very actively used in Ukraine. A bit later, we became a partner to offline Dear centers, offering consultation services for SMEs. And together with this ministry, we also established, I think it was some 3 years ago in Warsaw, that we established the first foreign Dear Business portal for businessmen who decided to scale up their Ukrainian operations abroad. So this is a very incomplete list. There is also a very interesting program, the National Cashback, and I'm sure all of you are familiar with that. We are a technological partner for this program as well. It's a unique program indeed, because nowadays, it's definitely about offering support to SMEs, inclusive, but it's also unique in technical terms, because nowadays it combines 15 banks and dozens of thousands of trading partners. It covers more than 400,000 different items of goods and more than 1 million consumers who use this software. So this cashback actually takes place in real-time terms. Everything is transparent, swift, and convenient. Recently, we also became a technological partner to e-entrepreneur, e-підприємець, so you can not only get registered and do it very quickly, but you can also obtain a package of financial services. And all of this can be done easily online just within 1 day, whereas you would have had to use several days or sometimes weeks before, so we ought to keep working. If I touch upon technologies, we will revert to that at a later point in our discussion. But if we get back to lending, Ms. Larissa has just given us the number of $100 billion. This is the amount necessary for Ukraine's recovery. I think that this number is only going to grow because the war is not finishing, and it's just causing new devastation, new damage, and is just staggering in terms of the number as opposed to our GDP. And the predominant majority of this recovery is about lending for long-term projects. It's about building bridges, railways, power plants, loans which are issued for years and years, perhaps sometimes decades. So how can private bank find, and how is it looking for and sourcing money, this long-term money, to be able to fund these lending programs? Making sure that they are relatively inexpensive, because offering a 25% interest rate for the energy sector, it's possible right now, but I don't think it's going to last for long. So what are the sources of this long-term money? How to handle this problem? How is your bank approaching this issue? Taras, it's a very important issue indeed, but before I answer, I would like to make a bridge between what Inga has just said and the issue of lending, which still persists and will continue being a problem even after the war. We have spoken about the increasing share of cashless payments. So transparency, of course, is one of the key bottlenecks and one of the deficiencies that we have to resolve and address as the entire society, because nowadays this disbalance is clear. The banking system is super liquid, it's ready to issue loans, and there is also a high demand on behalf of borrowers, but the synergy is not working. Why not? Because we have this deficiency of transparent and solvent borrowers. So one share of these businesses are working in shadows, when another share of businesses are not compliant with the quality of reporting, of divulging the structure of their ownership, bank, even with all of their available resources, are not ready to assume all of those risks in place. That's why it requires the synergy of all actors on this market in order to incentivize transparency, to make sure that transparency is rewarded. Because it's not just our curiosity of the banks to look into every can stored and buried somewhere in the ground. But basically, this is a requirement, it's a standard of the EU, of our legislation. And after all, this is something that will enable your businesses to grow. So transparency is the baseline for our lending. And reverting to your question, where we can find long-term money and how to fund large-scale infrastructural projects, I suppose it's a two-pronged thing. Large infrastructural projects, starting with them. First, let me make the following point. There was the first thing that happened to Privatbank after the beginning of the war. For the first time after last year, after nationalization, we got back to lending capital to large corporate businesses because the economy requires implementing large-scale infrastructural projects. And the largest in-scale loan that we issued up until now, it's 4.7 billion hryvnias to Naftogaz. So today, when you turn on your gas in your kitchens today, remember that this is also with the help of Privatbank, and we are caring about you, even though you may not be our clients. And talking about long-term money, there's no long-term money available in the market, it's true. And this money can only appear in some, due to the assistance offered by IFIs, or due to attracting foreign direct capital, or by way of attracting securities, bonds, inclusive. So making sure that all of the economy is fueled with the money of Ukraine's national banking system. I mean, it's impossible to make it grow. And in the first place, of course, we have to make sure that capital markets need to grow. Unfortunately, Ukraine has a lot of negative experience that we got back in 2014 with reference to the deliverables of the functionality of this market. I don't even know how to say whether this customer is semi-alive or semi-dead. But clearly, this definitely has to be one of the focal points for the society and for the markets. How to revive these financial markets. And we are working on it now. We have put our heads around it, and we have already a project that we would like to offer to the market, the new tools of investment, where we are finalizing some of the new procedures, new risk controls to participate in this revival of capital markets. Thank you. Most interesting, intriguing. I think that Mr. Ruslan will also be sharing about this a bit more concerning long-term money. If we look at the global experience, the main source of long-term money in all of the developed economies, this main source is pension funds. And some 10 years ago, maybe it's not relevant nowadays, back in 2017, there was a report issued by 25 largest pension schemes in the world. At that time, they had accumulated, imagine, $42.5 trillion, $42,000 billion are contained within pension funds in these countries. While Ukraine, nowadays, it's about 600 million, and no dollars, but hryvnias, it's 175,000. It's the amount of all of the pension accumulations of all of the Ukrainians altogether. However, the topic once again is addressed of the pension reform And the anticipations are that this time there will be a mandatory part, maybe not mandatory fully. So we would like to delegate this question to Mr. Denise, who has just arrived from Minfin, where he used to take care of all of the money within the Ministry of Social Policy, and now he will have to take care of pensioners' money. So what are the plans concerning the pension reform? What are we to expect? Will the Ministry of Social Policy get engaged in the establishment of this reform in order to inject new blood into our economic system? Thank you very much for having me. Ministry of Social Policy in this circle looks a little bit like a black sheep. But my previous experience within the Ministry of Finance, I was responsible for balance and for funding. Now at the Ministry of Social Policy, this ministry is the second largest in costs and ministry after the Ministry of Defense. So our financial system has been able to survive within these years. Banking system keeps working. Public finance is operational, but just the survival of financial system is something that we have lived through, and the next step is investing, and the financial system has to be conducive to the development of economy. You have properly put it. Again, the issue of long-term money is being raised. And again, another issue is being addressed, mandatory pension funds, accumulation of that. It's our pillar 2 in a way. Let us delve deeper into the context. Let's take an excursion into the history of some of the neighboring countries like Poland. In 2014, what this country did was withdraw all of the public bonds from all of the public companies, and they relaunched this operation. And that country immediately gained opt-out. The system squeezed. And in fact, the second level is misfunctional. The second example to cite in this respect is 2010, Hungary. This was the level to have been nationalized. Another option was Romania. Given the fact that their market is very narrow, there's nothing much to invest in. 2/3 of the second level were invested in the government securities. It's not something that we are striving for. This long-term private capital is never going to be generated. Latin America and Chile, for example, during COVID, they began to withdraw money from the second level, and once again it's misfired. There are exceptions indeed to this system. These are the countries like Denmark, the Netherlands, Australia, or the most famous Swedish premium pension model. But again, what it has as its foundation is deep markets, rigid regulation, and very mature infrastructure and powerful controllers and managers. We are only building this. We are on the way to that. Moreover, these are not our findings, but the findings by OECD and International Monetary Fund, that the success of the second level depends very heavily on the tools where all of these accumulations, mass accumulations, will have to be channeled. And with that, we have a lot of questions, so it's something that we have to deal with, and I think Ruslan will be able to tell more. I don't want to steal the thunder from him. And I suppose that the Ministry of Social Policy and the banking sector have a lot more to contribute to that. So let's have a look at the risks offered to Ukraine, the establishment of the second level. All of these contributions will have to be invested at once. We cannot just create a pool and wait for the opportunities for investments, because they will be devalued. And the Ministry of Social Policy and I, within this institution, stand for the interests of the people who are investing in these resources, the owners of these resources. Moreover, the single instrument for such investments is UVDP in Ukrainian. We all know very well that within the framework of the EU accession, we have to make sure that 60% of our GDP is debt and 40% is something that belongs to us. I think it's all in the past. No, we are moving along these lines. Have a look at the reports. As a result of our screenings, the fastest, by the way, of all of the countries. And in the section of public finance, this is a requirement brought forward, and the IMF is also giving to us the same kind of load. So the banking system, when it has a lot of liquidity, private investors are also investing into this. So pension investments in this market, I think they are going to be squeezed. Be reminded, or maybe let me explain if you do not understand very much about the second level. The World Bank, some 30 years ago, offered a 3-level pension model. The first level is the solidarity model that we have, in fact, when the money from our pensioners immediately goes to our pensioners for payments. The third level, we also have some of it, 6 to 7 million hryvnias. These are the voluntary savings of our pensioners, as well as the money that goes from the payroll during the time of their working full-time for these companies. So the system is operational, but this share is very small. But with reference to the second level, this is the major level, mandatory level of funding, when from our salaries, a share of that, and maybe the government adds to then some 2 or 3% according to the draft law. Some 2 or 3% of our salaries will go into our investment pension accounts. And if you have a look at at the size of the payroll in our economy, it's about 3 trillion. So 2% of 3 trillion, it's about 100 million hryvnias on an annual basis to come as a revenue to this level. So this is a huge amount, but they're only available for 1,800,000. So this is not going to change very much the situation in terms of attraction. We're not going to grow substantially in terms of the public debt. If once again we offer such an opportunity for the pension funds, I'm ready to argue with you. Basically, if you take a look at the budgets, the new issuance, well, not issuance, but the rollover is 100%. That is, we as the country, as the government, buy exactly as much as we repay. It's about 520 billion. And out of them, the public bank sector is about 70%. So the state-owned banks are 70%, and 100% rollover says that we will never reduce our benchmark of debt to lower than 70%, so basically 30%. So basically it should be about 21% or 30% in the market, and then the market will have as much as 400 million. And I would like to see 400 billion hryvnias to be able to operate. So I'm not very much of a proponent of Pillar 2, because the amount of funds which was supposed to go to the pool of ESV will instead go to the accumulation part. And in part, we will create a deficiency of public funding, and for the Ministry of Finance, this will, of course, be a gap that they will have to close with various kinds of debt instruments. So in this construction, we simply postpone the problem for later, and the global experience has already testified to that, and the experience of
We are moving in a different direction. We are now working on the reconstruction of the pension system in the following way. We want to make it more understandable and to make it an honest and system that will comprise 2 components. First, it will be a model similar to the French one that is very functional in France and Sweden. It will be the age-based payment. It is very straightforward, and it is the system of distribution of the solidarity system that is based solely on the structure where the share of the person, of every person who have contributed to the system, they will get the funds back at retirement. Secondly, it's the reconstruction of social special pensions into professional ones. We will not be having any kind of specialized pensions. There will be professional kind. The professional part of this structure will become this tool. And once again, the third element is the fact that it will be a voluntary depositing system. Maybe it may include a subscription plan with a opportunity to opt out, but it will be voluntarily. We want to be honest as a country. We should be investing into tools that will not lead to a critical situation. So we want to be honest with those people who will be participants of the system. And the most important part here is that the depositing part of the system includes certain tools, and engaging our international partners to the design of such tools is of ultimate importance. We want to engage the foreign managers of such funds, which can be a solution for this kind of model. And we need to create the tools that will be the green bonds or social bonds or funding certain straightforward projects. That can also happen, but it still needs to be voluntary by providing the understandable tools and strategies of such funds and instruments. Thank you so much. As a representative of the capital market, let me argue with you a little bit. It's true that there are no tools at the moment, but if they come around, for example, if a Nova Posta, like Nova Post, if they issue 100 billion bonds, they want to grow, they want to do this, but who will get their bonds? The banks won't, because they do not have such passive assets. The state will not. The individuals would be more inclined to buy the bonds that will be 20% plus profitable, because of something that is not also taxable, unlike the corporate bonds. So therefore, it's this dilemma of the hen and the egg. How will we handle this kind of problem? Let me ask this question to Denis. Let me suggest a really quick comment here. The issue here is that let us go back to the year 2022, with the beginning of the full-scale invasion. The state went on to the market of domestic bonds for individuals, and if we really so this market can really ruin your thesis. The physical individuals, they are willing to invest into understandable tools. Any person, any private individual that has their own savings, they are willing to invest if they have the trust into this tool. They need to understand that if they need to withdraw their funds, these tools will be liquid. They can withdraw or exchange and so on. If we guarantee this kind of the setting, we can get this long-term resource, because physical individuals, they are willing to invest. If we really take a look at the domestic government securities, there are quite a few of those in the profile of physical individuals. It's about 103 billion at the moment, which is a very minor percent of our GDPs. So the argument to this is the fact that domestic government securities are not taxable, and in order to overcome those, business need to be issuing bonds that will be covering 30% more than that, and also in taking count of the risks. So it brings us to 20% plus. which is rather difficult to do. So we're talking about trust that needs to be there in the picture, but also profitability. If we're talking about the social projects, they are not so highly profitable. And do we want to invest in those? That is a question. Mr. Ruslan, we see that everybody involved needs money. The bank does, the economy does, the pension system is getting on its feet still, as mentioned by Mr. Diniz. It's not ready to provide the long-term money. What will be the solution, the way out of it? Mr. Taras, thank you so much for the question. I want to thank my colleagues, my co-panelists that have created this intrigue as if I will have the answer to all questions. Well, there were lots of arguments voiced by my fellow panelists that I want to agree with to one extent or another. But since, although they may be contradicting each other, but they're still functioning. Basically, all of our life is math. Money can be found where there is profit. Money stays where it's profitable. And as we were talking about SMEs that are growing and that are using cashless payments. And we have seen a great rise of investors from the individual sphere, the military and their families that have received access to rather substantial funds, but on the securities market of Ukraine, there are no tools currently. I will not be talking about why this happened, but this is the way it is at the moment. And us as the Commission, we taking into account everything that was happening, and I have been in the market of securities of Ukraine for over 20 years. I know all of the historical background. We have decided to really give it a thought. How can we create a solution that will not create competition to the domestic securities? Then back to the math here. It does not matter what wrapper we use for wrapping the funds. It can be ECG or the green funds or corporate bonds. If I am a business and I need money, how much this money will cost me? If I need to pay 25 or 30% for the money, I am not very likely to issue those corporate bonds, and I'm more likely to go ask for a loan backed by some of my assets. On the other side, on the other hand, there are people that have funds, about 1 trillion of hryvnia, that they are willing to invest. And if we take this money as the foundation, and if we realize that we can access part of it, we could. But in order to be able to do this, we need to offer the public the tools, the instruments that will create the conditions that would be similar to domestic government securities, but be slightly different so that there's no competition. It is not something that we're trying to invent. It is already existing. It's a certain kind of deposit account that will be created. It is analytical accounting that will be performed by the investment firms that will be duly certified, and these accounts will be accessible to the residents of Ukraine for physical individuals. And using these accounts, the people will be able to invest money into the bonds that will be available. What does this investment account provide? It provides for an opportunity to get tax discount. If people keep the money in for 5 years, after 5 years, people will be able to withdraw the profits that have been generated after 5 years without tax, but only provided that this term is respected. This gives people an opportunity to do some kind of investment, something that is different from OVDP, because this is the only kind of bond that is not taxable in terms of deposit options. And the problem here is not that there is certain money that they need to pay, but the fact that this money needs to be administered, it needs to be managed. For example, if you have, for example, 2 hryvnias, then this needs to be processed, so to say, on various levels. And our idea is to to enable people to take this money beyond this taxation system, so that there is no such overhead efforts to do this taxation procedure. This enables people to take advantage of this long-term money procedure to keep the profits that they will be able to access after a certain while. And for the state, it is an opportunity to gain access of the funds. It is absolutely legal money that is now just sitting idle in the pockets of people. And it is killing two birds with one stone. We have been seeing various bloggers that are talking about various avenues of investment, the solar panels or hotels in the west of Ukraine. We see demand for this, and the tool is not there yet. And so our individual investment accounts is our project that we're working on. We are in a vivid discussion with the Ministry of Social Policy and Ministry of Finance that we will be engaging into this process. So our goal is to create this tool that will create the framework for these tools to work, because at the moment we do have the agricultural notes and so on, but they are not fully functional because the math is very complicated. It is much simpler to go give the money over to the bank as a deposit, and then the bank can take care of what happens from there. And another component that I want to mention is digitalization. At the moment, nothing is possible without it, because no one wants to go and do some paperwork, make a Xerox copy of a document and mail it somewhere. Everybody wants to simply use their smartphone, use DIA for these procedures. I believe that Denise here could use this bit of advice. Maybe you could cooperate with the Ministry of Digitalization and to invest some effort into the third level investment, if it's possible to do via smartphone. Something that was mentioned by Denise Sulutin is that the investment into OVDPs has grown from private individuals. Why did this happen? It is because for example, when I went to work for the committee, the problem was that investment firms could not enter into relations with their clients remotely with the compliance of the regulatory principles of the banks. But now it is sufficient to just push a few buttons and you already have the access to a bank account. As regarding the security market, the situation was not the same. It was blocked from remote operations. And once those limitations were lifted, this promoted people to be investing into OVDPs. For example, if the military are staying at the front line, they still have their smartphones and they have their money. They cannot go and take a look at the apartment that they want to invest their money in, but they can use their smartphones. They have access to the internet. They can make a deposit or invest their money in OVDPs. At the moment, there is money in the bank system because it has been digital for a while now. OVDPs have become digital not so long ago, and the level of engagement of the population is growing, but it is not very substantial at the moment on the national scale. So Privatbank is one of the main players at the moment, working with retail. Well, both banks, Privatbank and Bank, they are the most active for engaging physical private individuals on the capital market. But regarding banks, there is internal competition where they need to decide whether we want to get the people's money as a deposit or sell OVDPs for them. For example, and other actors, if there is a different level of digitalization, we can engage the long-term money. Because now, even if we claim that there are certain tools that are less taxable, so to say, or same as OVDP, but there is some paperwork to be done, there is some location to come, to go. We are not likely to be able to really promote such tools and change the overall picture. I believe that several investment firms, they are already doing it. As of us, we have 1,000 clients every month opening their accounts via digital mechanism. Actually, Taras, the last point I want to make is that everybody says that the infrastructure is lacking, it is not compliant, but this is the process that will be harmonious if there's business, if there's proper math. For example, you have business, you have created an application, you want it to grow. Our task as a regulating body to create a mechanism that will accommodate big money, and it will be profitable for the participants and for the state and the actual relevant economy sector that will create jobs and pay taxes. Therefore, we are working on this initiative, and we hope that it will get the support from the members of parliament, and in the year 2026, this tool will be available already. Let me ask a quick question here. It is very curious what you're saying about the individual investment accounts. You mentioned that there will be two aspects that would guarantee the success of this tool. First of all, it's the operability of this instrument and the profitability based on solid math. But there is another aspect that I want to ask about. How can you bring the trust, assure this trust? Because at the moment, the banking system does have the trust brought by the tremendous efforts carried out by the National Bank over the years. At the moment, the state selling OVDPs, it does have the trust, but how can you assure the trust into the new tool where people will be giving money to the investment funds?
Look, it's a very good question indeed. It's about business transparency. And again, let's get down to math. Once business sees that it's profitable for it to become transparent, it will ensure all of the mechanisms in place. There is corporate governance in place. Thankfully, it's much better than it was back in 2014, at the time when the bond and corporate securities market was very active. It existed prior to 2010, more or less. And then we had problems in place that there was intransparent ownership models or governance. Emittents would also mistreat minority owners. But nowadays, this problem is much less. For example, we don't have the problem of selective payments of dividends. It's a majority owner decides that he has to pay, then he will have to pay everyone via the central depository. It's impossible for majority owners to have payments and minority payments not to owners not to have anything. So everything is very well working right now in terms of private capital. But for this control instrument to become popular within businesses, there has to be something else ensured. So businesses need to be willing to become transparent. But right now, the businesses are thinking whether to optimize their income tax, get defended from different raidship deals, and therefore they have low level of credibility and they're oblique. On the other hand, there is nothing much for them in the way not to be transparent. So we want to offer people a possibility. You're a business, you want to attract investments, please comply with all of the norms and standards in the legislation, both at the level of primary and secondary laws, at the level of our Securities Commission, and then such an emittent will be able to attract money. And those who will buy these instruments, they can be sure that all of the rules have been complied with and their interests are protected. That's one side to the coin, but let's think back to another one. When we think about lending, about domestic securities, all of these are the instruments of high reliance and high reliability. But in Ukraine, there's nothing for Ukraine who have a high appetite for risk. Everyone is rushing about thinking, when are we going to legalize cryptocurrency? What kind of tax will follow? But the people investing in cryptocurrency are not about transparency or reliability at all, because volatility sometimes is so high. You can get rich in a day, but that happens very infrequently. But the people who are willing to invest in high-risk tools, unfortunately, Ukraine has nothing to offer to them. So we are pushing everyone into the cryptocurrency because definitely it is a contemporary tool, but it's fraught with nothing for the economy. So if there are securities or stocks of a private or a public company, state-owned company, and if we have money as a result of these securities, this money will definitely go towards the contribution to this enterprise, and this will inject fresh blood in the economy. But when our governments, when our citizens just invest money in crypto, that's nothing much. Well, I know that you also have some things to say about the public IPOs. I didn't know when I could mention that. Thank you very much for stirring me into action. This is another side to our holy grail, or the silver bullet I was talking about. We're not going to have a powerful explosion maybe taking place to become a driver of our economy, to become a momentum, because these individual accounts, it's the source of long-term money, but this money needs to be invested in something. And for starters, it's suggested to offer all of the willing ones to have stocks and shares of the state-owned companies which pay dividends. So the idea lies in the fact that we need to set example to businesses of how to attract money, because even I get some requests from SME owners, and they say, if we issue our stocks, what amounts of an investment can we talk about? Or at least what amount can become our baseline for us to start talking about some prognostication? So when we begin to speak about the domestic securities in the hands of the general public or stored in their deposits, it's not a very proper way to do that, because this is the story about repricing. Even the most lucrative companies, the most famous companies, they lose money as recapitalization. But there are some people who are willing to play. Before the war, we could invest in the different stocks of Tesla, Google, Amazon before the war. And this allowed people to have something different from fixed income. But anyway, it incentivized not the national economy. So the idea of the public IPO, our people's IPO, it's to sell the stock exchanges of 7% of the state-owned stock exchanges. 7% is above 5%. Once we have it in the market, majority owners will have 93%, and we are not going to run the risk of the so-called squeeze-out happening when the majority owner will require it from the minority owner to sell their shares. And the second part to it is under 10%. Why do we need to ensure it? To maintain the full governance by the state. So those who will opt for these government securities will enjoy this credibility. They will understand that the same management, the same supervisory boards will remain in place, the same indicators will in place, but there will be a new leverage at the expense of which they will be able to earn some dividends. Next, the rest will follow. Someone will buy it for long and keep it for a long time, whilst others will be speculating with this. So the players of the stock market will have an additional tool to earn more. They will be able to earn more with promotion and attract more people. So the final point of this grail, as I refer to it, is not just to sell the 7% of stocks of state-owned companies, but the end game is to ensure such conditions that in some 3 years after we launch this project in Ukraine, we have 5 million investors in stocks and shares and in securities. Nowadays, domestic securities have some under 100,000 owners in Ukraine. But if we have about 5 million active players in the market, then it means that we will be able to build some relations with them, offer them something new, make sure that they get heard, and then we can talk about some pecuniary volumes that can be attracted. Because if private companies get to see that, for example, I don't know, there is an idea to place 7% of that in Privatbank. It's a commonly known bank presenting very good results. Even during the war, they issue loans. They have a transparent governance structure. So why not buy stocks of this company? And I suppose that many have already opted for that, and you don't have to explain why, or Naftogaz of Ukraine. So you simply have to choose something that goes without saying, does not require a lot of promotion, and this will give momentum for people and to go and buy. And our financial observers will consider not only crypto, but maybe some other mechanism different from fixed income instruments and tools, like KIEF, for example, which launched its IPO abroad. Why? Because they couldn't calculate whether they would be able to attract the necessary amount of money within Ukraine. There are some other reasons why I'm talking about KIEF. But I would like to make sure that with years, both KIEF and other companies attract their funding here, because this engages investors, first of all, because when NASDAQ sells KIEF stocks and shares, we incentivize their foreign markets. But it's a very good, one of the leading telecommunications companies, not only in Ukraine, but world over. And unfortunately, it is in circulation abroad, not in Ukraine. But I would like to bring them back to Ukraine. But we need to make sure that the mathematics is attractive. So this popular IPO of 7% and individual accounts, these are the two components that will have to bring about this great explosion. Okay, this looks very complicated, very complex. Maybe the pension funds, maybe accumulating, maybe binding these two approaches together will help. Well, this third element will play in later, because pension money is very tender, it's very sensitive. Even if you dream that tomorrow the shares of Naftogaz or other ones appear in open public circulation, it's impossible to invest pension system's money into that, because the volatility is high. But the pension system is called to preserve money and to make it grow in size. So something that Denise mentioned. We need to make sure that these stocks and shares and securities appear, that they make a statement, that there is a track record that they generate. We understand who is more volatile, who's less, and then pension money will become the second implosion wave, so to say. So emittance will be more or less well known, with a constant price that is not going to be highly volatile. So when pension money enters this market, then it will be an exorbitant model, like this Polish model. Okay, we have heard a fantastic amount, 5 million of Ukrainian individuals come into the market. This is the objective, the end game. These are individuals, legal entities of Ukraine, representatives of Ukraine's diaspora. I'm talking about the general number of investors. Okay, clarification to make. My point is, today about 100,000 accounts, 200,000 accounts have been established in this stock exchange. So foreigners, locals, and increasing this amount to 5 million, which is 25-fold, this is highly ambitious, and it's great that the regulator is setting themselves with such a goal. Now my question goes to Ms. Olena. Sense Bank is one of the most active banks in the capital market. What is your estimate of this ambition and attainability? of such a growth in the number of investors. I agree with Denise and Larissa. I suppose that it's based on trust. Investors need to trust. Ruslan has given an example. Indeed, we were the first to sell in the application the stocks and shares of other companies, international companies. This is not an investment in the budget of Ukraine to do foreign exchange regulation. But if you think about 3 to 5% stable interest rate or 20% when everything is highly volatile, it's all up to trust, and credibility. So something that Ruslan said, 7%. Well, let's take Privatbank as an example. I suppose it's a superb example because they have a fantastic private governance system and profitability, and it demonstrates clearly that the government can control this bank properly. But 7%, I would definitely go for more to sell. And another issue for investors, do they trust you so much? This is us in our professional community. We know so much about Privatbank that everything is really reliable. But the average Ukrainians, do they trust the government, that the government is an efficient owner in their eyes? This is a very proper question. So far, so good. They have the money after all. They keep money in Privatbank, right? So they do trust it. But there are fixed obligations in this case, and the National Bank will immediately punish you, give you a slap around your neck. But securities, it's not something to be regulated by omittance. So, Mr. Denise, speaking about your past, do you think the government, because you used to hold the position of Ministry of Finance, do you think the government is interested in selling this package of stocks and shares of some lucrative banks? Why would they need that? I think that in this case, if talking about banking, at least it will reduce the amount of public ownership, because right now it's about 57% or 65%, 57%. So the government manages banking rather than the National Bank of Ukraine, I'm sorry to say, with all due respect to the National Bank. So the question is, why do we opt for Privatbank? Because we have Ukrgazbank in the market, and they're making a very good sale, and Bank. But again, for the government, let's get back to what the government owns. The selling of 7% of any state-owned bank, what that entails, first of all, it's an attempt. Give it a shot whether it works or not. And the next step will be the reduction of the government's participation in any business. But again, something that we have mentioned before, we have to speak about the effects and consequences of that, because nowadays banking system and state-owned banks are regulated with certain legislation. Since we back out of these banks, they will have to be regulated by other type of legislation. This will immediately evoke various kinds of changes, governance. But does everyone understand the effects of that? The government in this case is 100% owner, and it will get very much, but privatization is always used in terms of funding various projects, but privatizing will never become a tool to fund current outlay and costs. It's always an investment element, and the government needs this investment element. The government, this resource, is sorely needed. So this can be regarded only in connection with two things: realistic investment projects, substantial ones that will definitely make the economy grow, and the effects of such steps to be undertaken. Oh, come on, don't get fixed on the banks. We're not talking about them. Let's take Naftogaz. But is Naftogaz profitable after all? We have a lot of state-run companies which are profitable, and they produce a lot of revenue to the budget. We simply have to take a small share of these companies and present it to the people, and the people will understand, because they know that the government is used to surviving at the expense of dividends from these companies, and so will they. I understand the apprehension of some of the banking partners in this respect. If we were sitting here on an energy panel discussion, I think there would be some caveats on behalf of the energy regulator to talk about, and it's perfectly all right. All of the normal assets within the country are always defended, secured, protected with something to make sure that they do not get siphoned. And there are different kinds of legal restrictions, but if there is this political will in place, this can be changed and amended without losing control. All right, a very short question to Ms. Larissa. What's your perception? What's your take on all this? If the government undertakes all of the due steps, and if the 7% package is presented as a public IPO, popular IPO, involving not only individuals but legal entities, will the private bank be ready to have the form of their ownership changed, having some 5 million owners of it? I'm sitting and listening to all of this discussion and thinking to myself, is it a wish list or is it an action plan? Because in actual fact, an IPO is a matter for shareholders to consider. Whether this IPO will happen or not, it's a matter for the Ministry of Finance to consider. So if an IPO is supposed to change something about the corporate company who would like to launch this IPO, you see, this is all about the competence of communicating with the owners. We don't have this competence in the market. We only have a couple of companies that have experience of launching their IPOs. But in order to achieve it, we need to think about where to find this competence, how to make it grow, because investors require a certain standard of communication, standard of information, but this expertise, unfortunately, is non-existent in the market, so we have a lot to prepare for. All right, we are moving on to the last part of our panel, cyber future, because the financial system is getting ever more digital. DIA portal has implemented the fast bank account opening, and this is working. Many other things. This is also fraught with all of many threats. So what are the threats? What are the methods to counteract these threats? How are we to prepare for the future? Because we remember Petya, the virus, which destroyed half of the account offices in Ukraine, and our enemy is still strong, and they know how to do it, and they probably are not going to do it in the short run. So how is this to be understood in terms of settlement systems, payment systems? Because Mizinga, you and your company, how are you planning and preparing for this digital future? How to tackle these challenges?
Taras, thank you. I believe that in Ukraine, this digital future is already ongoing. Let me provide you some figures so that you get a feel of how potent the digital background is already in Ukraine present. So 9 out of 10 operations are cashless, something that we mentioned already. It's about the transparency of economy. So 9 out of 10 are cashless. That's for the National Bank. Our statistics say that about 60% of the transactions in physical shops, it will be done with the use of NFC. We're very used to it. Ukraine, I don't even remember how many years in a row we have been in top 10 of the countries in the world for the transactions via NFC. So the digital standards are very developed with us. Something that I also want to mention is that all of this is a result of the interaction and cooperation of a great number of enterprises, sectors, and institutions, including the states. It's the financial institutions, the commercial partners that support these high standards at the moment. But we need to understand that the digital agenda, of course, involves certain risks and challenges that arise, including the cyber threats, which is one of the most powerful. I know that the experts estimate that before 2029, the market of cyber risk will be estimated at $15 trillion. If we compare it to the GDP, it's actually could be the third economy in the world after the USA and China. Therefore, this risk is huge. What are we doing? Well, us as a payment system, we are working with technology. A lot has been said about trust and the payment systems. They also include the technology that need to be able to generate trust. Because if you didn't trust us, we would not use the NFC to pay for your morning coffee using your smartphone or your smartwatch. The first technology that is well known to all of us is tokenization. At the moment, the statistics of the national banks says that more than 50% of the cards have been tokenized. Globally, over 30% of transactions in the world are those that have been tokenized. We are working very much in MasterCards to make sure that all transactions for online transactions are tokenized so that we do not need to enter any parameters manually. Sometimes we can still face that at certain websites, but and before 2030, we want to have all the traffic tokenized. It is all about safety because token is not the card details. We are talking about the unique one-time single-use token to support a certain transaction. The next trend that does not only relate to transactions, it is the artificial intelligence. We have been using it for many years now. We have lots of big data and we're processing 100 billion transactions yearly. We can see certain and analyze certain patterns. If we see certain abnormal patterns, we can qualify this transaction as a risk. We are able to warn to prevent this transaction, and by doing this, we help prevent theft and fraud. And something else that I would like to mention is that this collective support, the collective protection, we call it the global immune system. The minute we see a cyber attack is happening and is targeting a certain financial institution in a certain country, the artificial intelligence tool immediately analyzes the situation and suggests solutions to warn other financial institutions from the risk and in order to prevent this risk from happening in other institutions in other countries. I believe that as regards the cybersecurity, it is the ecosystem that needs to be designed, and we all need to contribute to this. It is not a one-day task. The regulator actors, they work on the legal framework. The technological companies develop certain solutions. The financial institutions implement these technologies and solutions to assure that our clients have a comfortable and safe way of using these technologies. And us, as the consumers, we just use and enjoy. The main figure that I want to conclude with, just give me one more minute, please. At the moment, the data of the world market, the level of financial inclusion is 88%. It is very encouraging because in 2018 it was only 60% or less. It means that 88% of Ukrainian population have opened accounts in Ukrainian banks. They are officially and transparently a member of the financial system of Ukraine. Therefore, the digital future of Ukraine is already ongoing, but there are certain tasks that we need to do in order to make it safe and quick. Thank you so much for this look, for this point of view. What about the regulatory organ of the financial system? All of the transactions are all digitalized. How does our financial system, including the banking system, how is it prepared to these challenges to enhance the regulation? And also another part of the question is a positive one. It concerns hryvnia. Will it be e-hryvnia also on the scene? Is there anything planned in this regard, the electronic hryvnia? Okay. Okay, we have 3 minutes left. Okay, well, the cyber front. Let me split this into two parts. When you were hacked, or when your partner or your other person was hacked. So over the recent 4 years, I think it's less than that, 3.5 for the banking system, the greatest implication was that when the client was hacked, it was some kind of a phishing, so where the funds were stolen. And unfortunately, the losses sustained by the clients due to lack of awareness or ignoring the cyber hygiene rules. So it does happen, and in our common work as regulators and the payment systems and the bank and financial community, we need to raise the awareness. We need to train the people, the population, to use the digital tools properly and safely. And there was a case with one of the banks, with one of the celebrities, well-known person. When a financial institution is hacked, we do understand that it's a hybrid war that Ukraine is engaged in, and the work that's done to assure regulation and coordination between the national banks and the other banks. At the moment, the financial institutions are also part of this deal, and the Center for Cybersecurity, a cyber response provided by the National Bank, including the relevant unities in Ukraine and abroad. It enables to quickly respond, and of course also first and foremost to prepare to certain threats. And in case a threat happens, the implications can be mitigated and the recovery can be done quickly. If at the beginning of the full-scale invasion there were some incidents with small banks that took a long time to recover before the regulation was in place, and now those DDoS attacks that involve hacking into the financial system of a institution, we have not heard of those. But we are not resting. We understand that this combat is ongoing, and we know that this system that we have built needs to be upgraded. But let us not also ignore other threats. There is also a concept of digital operational stability, digital operational resilience. And Ukraine is moving towards implementing this DORA. One of the new regulations for us will be minimizing the reliance on third parties. We have already felt this reliance, this dependence on the third countries, on the third parties of our financial system. For example, our financial system may be stable, but this link of energy is rather weak, as it was discovered. Then there was also an issue with the state registries, where banks could not process existing accounts or open new ones. We have learned our lessons, and these 2 years we have worked on the implementation of what was missing in the legal framework regarding compliance with DORA, and also in 2027 or 28, we have started implementing it at the level of the regulatory acts of the National Bank, and bringing it over to the operations of the financial institutions, not solely banks. Therefore, the future is looking bright. I believe that the banking system is prepared and will continue to be prepared to certain technological risks. Regarding Grivna, we are working on it along with other central banks in the world. We are exploring this area in order to gain an understanding and ability to make a decision as regards the implementation of e-grivna. We are currently considering digital e-grivna at the legislative level. It is a legal payment method. It is just a digital form of a payment unit. When it will be implemented and whether it will be, it is an open question. We are preparing the pilot project that will be open. Open meaning that it will not just be somewhere secluded. It will involve real users, real service providers, and real merchants that we will that we will engage for this pilot testing. There will be various transactions rehearsed between the institutions and consumers and so on. But any kind of pilot requires funding. It is rather costly. And at the moment, we have created a short list of the suppliers that we would like to invite to carry out this pilot. Because we realized that once the tool is implemented, this tool needs to be very, very stable because lots of money will be involved. But it is very, once again, a very costly research that may be not very relevant in the state of war. But do you remember what brought about PayPal? It appeared when the situation was such that it was not possible to insert a bank card into a slot in the computer to pay for something on eBay. Therefore, there will be a solution in the future, but at the moment there is not such a case for grivna. Potentially in the future it will be a replacement for card technology, but a lot of work will need to be involved from the part of the merchants and other actors. And when our colleagues hear these ideas, they say that forget about it for now. But so therefore I will not claim that e-grivna will be implemented in anytime soon. Okay, so let us then operate with our beloved grivna. We will finish our panel at this. Olena Zubchenko, Ruslan Mahomedov, Larisa Cherneshova, Alexei Chaban, Inga Andreeva, and Denis Ulutin. Thank you so much for your attention. Goodbye, everyone.